intro.
We do.
I have an idea for one, but not today.
What's up? You don't do that? Oh.
No. Yo, my name is Kieran, and this is my co-host, Candy McAnulty, and welcome to One on One with PK.
Free internet.
You guys use pigeons?
I don't care what you plan.
Because we want them to learn. We want them to grow. You know, I love you. I do want you.
What up, bro? You Gucci?
I'm
How you
good.
doing today? I'll be honest with you, the Bucks lost last night.
Yeah.
I'm not as mad as I thought I would be because it's only week 3 and the Rams are a great team. And we are down like several players on defense. And so we need some character building games because when we win the Super Bowl, we don't want to make it look too easy. You know what I'm saying? So that's I'm saying it right now. The Bucks will win the Super Bowl this year.
Interesting.
How the Lions do?
The Lions did what they always do. They lied down and
No,
allowed.
you can't say that. You can't say that. They played a great game. They lost by a field goal.
No, they played a good half.
Okay.
The first half was horrible.
But they were in the game, though.
The second half, they came back and did something, but just when you thought that they were dangerous because they were growling, they were roaring, they decided to be a kitty cat again.
Did you growl when you felt they're doing good?
No, I did not
were you at
torture
the-
myself with watching it.
Were you in front of the TV? Growl.
No, honestly, I was
Wow.
laying on a couch like this.
Apparently, so were the Lions.
Hey, yes, they were. Yes,
Sweet.
they were.
Oh man, yeah. So football. I'm excited about football season.
Nice,
So
nice. I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Just one of those things that's been rumbling around kind of in my heart.
Mhm.
What questions are you afraid to ask?
question I'm afraid to ask myself, other people, in general. Yes. I knew you were going to say that. Oh, man, questions I'm afraid to ask. I think let's start here. I'm afraid to ask questions that will reveal the trueness of my heart.
Mm.
We all have questions like that. There are things we don't want to even think about because we know that this is who I am. Let's start heavy.
Okay.
Do I drink too much? Alcohol, rather.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Or do I eat too much?
Yeah.
Or because you don't want to ask that because you're like, your soul will be like, yes, you do.
Right.
Coffee. Do I drink too much coffee? Yes. So on and so forth. So
Do I look in the mirror too much?
some, not enough. Anyways,
Why'd you look at me when you said that?
I didn't. I'm having a conversation with you, so it's
Wow.
natural to look at you when you're talking to someone.
Wow. No, it was the way that you looked at me.
There was no way, Pastor Ken. There was no way. But yeah, man, I think, yes, I do ask myself questions a lot. Or,
I think sometimes we have these questions that we're afraid to verbalize
yeah,
because we're afraid of the reality behind the question.
yeah,
Whether we're afraid of the answer or we're afraid of the question itself. And then you have these questions that we're afraid to bring out into the open and ask anybody else. They may be about ourselves, about us, but they're questions that can be asked in front of other people.
sure.
Questions like, am I angry often?
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think a fear of questions is unhealthy. I think a fear that keeps us from asking questions is really unhealthy.
It is. And this has to boil down to this kind of like self-awareness thing, concept, because, man, like, do we really know ourselves as much as we front or we portray that we do?
Right.
And I tell you, man, right now I ask myself a lot of questions often, but I'm afraid of the answers more or less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just, especially, I'll even tell you, go back during COVID, man, when we're in quarantine, and
Right.
there was a lot of questions in my head. I was like,
Questions like, do I fit here
do
anymore?
I fit here? Do I keep going? Is
Right.
this it? Should I quit? You know what I mean? Am I blah 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 blah? Am I adding value? Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. What if though the answer to the question that we're afraid to ask is what will give us true meaning? Even if the
That's-
answer's scary, what
Mm.
if that answer is the one that we're missing?
That's a good thing to ponder. Because so then what do you do with that answer then?
Well, I think kind of where this is coming from is the questions that are surfacing in our heart and in our mind are questions that need to be asked because it's questions that provoke us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too often we settle into a place where we don't grow because we're afraid to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
We're afraid of the answer because the answer brings uncomfortability. The answer brings perceived instability. The answer brings the unknown sometimes. Sometimes the answer brings 10 more questions, and so it brings and it stirs up this fear in us to even voice or ask the question because we don't know what will be on the other side of the answer. And yet what if what's on the other side of the answer is really the destiny that God has for us?
Mm.
What if it's God stirring up these questions in us? I am of the opinion, I grew up in a generation where it wasn't okay to ask questions a whole lot. And I am by nature a very curious sort. I like to ask questions and I'll ask, but it drove me to ask questions a lot of myself and internally, and then to discover and search out and seek out those answers.
Yeah.
But what I found is that it's within asking those questions that oftentimes that I've grown the most.
Mm.
It's in asking myself, was that the right response to my wife? That I've discovered that I'm responding wrong to my wife,
And And when you mention that, because then the reality of something deeper begins to unlock itself.
Yeah.
So why did I respond that deep? Because then
Yes.
like you mentioned, you start asking more questions. So is there
Yeah.
something wrong with me? Or not necessarily something wrong with me, but something I need to adjust? Well,
Really, is there something wrong with me? Am I
exactly.
in a bad place
Am I
right
in a
now?
bad place? Bad
And I think
mindset.
our willingness to ask questions is the provocateur of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And if we stop asking ourselves questions, if we live in this fear of asking questions, then we will also stagnate and not grow.
Right, because when questions cease, complacency begins to really flourish.
Right.
Laziness begins to take place. So like you said, stagnation, just being stagnant and static
Mm-hmm.
and still in your pursuit to be a better human being, if
Right.
anything.
So that's the question I've been wrestling with lately. What question am I afraid to ask? And you can transfer this or add on to this question in all sorts of ways. You can add on this caveat: what question am I afraid to ask God?
Mm.
And so, that's a question that I would kind of toss to you. What question are you afraid to ask God?
Yeah, let's completely be transparent for a moment, right? A question I'm afraid to ask God all the time. I don't want to say all the time, but very often is, why am I here? To be specific, in the position that I'm in, doing what I'm doing, why am I here?
Yeah.
And that breeds from a place of doubt, insecurity, and calling, the feeling of lack of that I'm not given enough value
Right.
per se. But that I seem to ask myself that more often than not. Why am I here? In ministry,
Yeah.
in church, here. Why am I here?
But you said you're a little bit nervous about asking God that question.
Because there's layers to it, obviously, and don't have time to go into it deeply today, but I feel like I know the answer, right? but I don't believe the answer.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, I know what you're going to say, but I don't believe that's true.
Mm.
So there's something deeper going on inside of that.
Yeah.
I have to wrestle with on my own, with God and other godly people. But yeah, man, it's like, so then you go, you know what, I tend to do this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just put this over here and look at it sometimes, but not really deal with it.
So one of the things that I've been wrestling through with this idea and alongside of what you're saying there is what happens when we ask the wrong person the question. And the thing that's hit my heart is when we ask the wrong person the question, is that gossip then?
Is it gossip?
Does it become gossip or dissent within our own heart? So, for instance, let's say I asked you to do something on Main Street for next Sunday.
Right.
If you were to come to me and ask me, hey, why are we doing this? That's not dissent. That's not rebellion. That's not gossip. That's you needing to understand.
For clarification, yes.
For clarification. If you go to somebody else and you say, why are we doing this? Now, all of a sudden, what you're doing, if you're going to the person who doesn't have the answer, is you're building an unstable environment. You're building dissent. It becomes gossip because now the two of you have to then try to assume the intention of my intention in that story. And so you leave space for gossip. You leave space for dissent. So I would push on this idea of us just holding that question to ourselves and not asking God with this question. If we're not asking the right person, are we building dissent in our life?
Man, yes. That's really powerful, because a lot of us kind of in the name, in the intention of venting,
right,
we'll ask the wrong person a question where we really should be going to the quote unquote right person. That's really good. That's really good. But then how do you know who the right person is? You know,
and that's a really good question. I think some things are obvious how we know the right person is, because I would say, we look at who's in authority. Your question of why am I here? Well, you're looking at the person who's in authority of that. That's God. God's the one who ordained you being here, so he would be the one to answer your question. If you only ask that question of yourself, then you build dissent within yourself, and you build upon this question. You make the question bigger than it really is. If you're asking God, then you give God an opportunity to answer, because he's the one who declared it to begin with. And so I would first look for who has authority over that, who's given you the charge, and I think that's the first way to identify that individual that you should be asking the question of. What happens when that doesn't work? What happens when that doesn't fit? I'm not sure. I'm still kind of walking through the process here. I don't know if you have any other qualifications or anything that you see.
No, I think
there.
Absolutely. I love that, who's in authority, but also I think proximity too. So people who are close to you, so I can come to you and ask that question.
Yeah.
And not for an authoritative stamp like, hey, no, this is why here, but more for support, because Scripture tells us to seek godly counsel.
That's true. Yeah. No, that's good.
So I would suggest, yes, go to whoever's in authority over that kind of sphere. Yeah. And also get some wise people around you. I think that's the problem with a lot of us. We don't have enough wise people, and wise doesn't mean degrees. Sometimes wise is someone who's been through it already.
Yeah.
Hey, you used to deal with this in your marriage.
Yeah.
How did, help me? You know what I'm saying? Or
that's a whole podcast unto itself.
That is crazy.
How we reject wisdom and don't put wisdom in our life.
And what we deem as wise.
Right.
Because sometimes wisdom can only appear to be degrees and pedigrees.
Yeah.
When wisdom can be someone who made it through a situation.
Yes.
Hey, what did you learn from there?
Yeah.
Help me. Oh, yeah, I learned X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But another thing, too, is not just asking the right person, but you have to ask the right person, I think, at the right time.
At the right time and in the right way.
In the right way.
So like, in that previous example where I asked you to do something on Main Street for Sunday, if you come to me and you say, hey, why are we doing this?
Yep.
It's going to open up an easy door for an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
If you come to me and you say, man, why are we doing this? I don't get why we have to do this. Well, that's going to immediately put that person who's answering on the defensive. And now they're having to defend their response as opposed to giving you a heart. And I think that the way that we ask a question, it reveals the intentionality of our heart sometimes.
Absolutely.
And we've got to be careful of that. We've got to check our heart first.
And that's a concept that I'm slowly trying to get better at. Yeah. I love to ask questions as well, but sometimes I ask the question as if I already know the answer. And it can come across as demeaning, sarcastic, rude, crude, and all that other stuff. And so, that's vital. How you ask it, the manner, tone, but the right time. Like, there's situational things where okay, this is a great opportunity for me to ask a question. Yeah. And there are moments this can wait. You know what I'm saying? This can wait till tomorrow, next week, next year.
But don't put it off indefinitely.
Don't put it off indefinitely, for sure.
Because I think that once again will just sow that dissent into your heart. And so I want to, before we just end today, just want to kind of toss that out to our viewers, that question. What question are you afraid to ask? What question are you putting off? And I want to encourage you to take a couple moments and just think deeply about that. Maybe it's a question of God. Maybe it's a question of your spouse. Right. Maybe it's a question of your parents. Maybe it's a question of yourself. Yeah. But what question are you afraid to ask? What question have you not vocalized that God wants to bring out so that he can bring you through a season of growth with that?
Amen. That's good.
Yeah.
Holla. Go Bucks.